All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to tackle a question that sounds like it's straight out of an old Western, but what it really does is pull back the curtain on a super important principle of American law. We're talking about invisible fences, county lines, and why they matter. A lot.
You've seen this scene a million times, right? The sheriff slams on the brakes right at the county line bridge and growls, "He's out of my jurisdiction now." But what does that actually mean? What invisible force field just stopped him? Well, the answer is way deeper than you'd think, and it doesn't start with the sheriff. It starts with the courthouse.
So, here's the first piece of the puzzle. You have to understand that a county court's power isn't limitless. No way. It's actually locked inside some very specific boundaries. It's almost like the courthouse itself has these huge, invisible walls that stretch all the way to the county line.
And get this, there's a legal term for this whole idea, intra-mural. It literally translates to within the walls. So just picture a county's jurisdiction as a big room. Inside that room, the court's power is total, but it absolutely cannot pass through those walls.
So what are these walls made of, legally speaking? Well, first off, the court's power is territorial. That's simple enough. It stops dead at the county line. Second, its situs fixed, which is really just a fancy way of saying its home base, its center of power, is the physical courthouse building. And third, it's writ limited. A writ is just a formal order from the court, and its power, its reach, only goes as far as the county border. And this really gets to the heart of the old common law rule this whole system is built on. A county court can't force anybody to do anything outside of its own backyard unless a higher authority, like the state, gives it a special permission slip. That right there is the bedrock principle for all of this. Okay, so we've got these strict walled-off territories. But, life is messy. People, property, all sorts of legal problems. They don't pay any attention to the lines on a map. And that creates a pretty big headache for a system that's built on walls. Yeah, exactly. What are you supposed to do if you need to sue someone who lives just one county over? Or what if you've got a property dispute and the land itself is in two different counties at once? The system had to come up with a fix.
And that fix came from a couple of clever types of laws. You've got venue statutes. Think of these as the official rulebook for deciding which county gets to be the home court for a case when there's an overlap. And then you have long-arm statutes, which are exactly what they sound like. They give a court a legal long arm to reach across county lines and serve papers.
Of course, there's another, much simpler way to solve the problem. You just go to a higher court. See, state-level courts aren't stuck inside those county line boxes. Their jurisdiction covers the whole state, so they can easily handle cases that spill across local boundaries. Okay, so the court has walls, we've got that down. Now let's finally connect this all back to our sheriff, because it turns out that same invisible fence doesn't just surround the judge, it surrounds the sheriff too. The sheriff's power is basically a carbon copy of the court's. It's county-bounded, yep, same lines on the map. It's process-bounded, which means the sheriff's main job is just to enforce the court's orders. But here's the most important one, it's derived. The sheriff doesn't just have power on their own, their authority flows directly from the court they serve. It's borrowed power.
So here's the bottom line, the thing you have to remember. Because the sheriff's power comes from a court whose own power stops at the county line, the sheriff's power has to stop there too. It's a simple but totally unbreakable chain of logic. Which brings us at last to the legendary posse comitatus, that group of regular citizens a sheriff could call on for help. We think of it as this unlimited, Wild West force, right? But it's actually tied to that exact same invisible fence. It's on a leash. And right here, this is the single sentence that ties everything we've talked about together. The posse gets its power from the sheriff, who gets his power from the court. So there is no way the posse's power can be greater than the court's. It just can't.
I mean, just look at how this chain of authority flows. It's a one-way street downhill. The court has power, but only inside the county. It hands that power down to the sheriff, who is also stuck inside the county. And the sheriff can then hand that power down to a posse, which is, you guessed it, also limited to the county.
At the end of the day, it's just this simple. If a court's legal order can't cross a county line, then neither can the sheriff or the posse who are trying to enforce it. That is the invisible fence. That's what stops the chase at the border. So why? Why is the whole system built this way, on these rigid territorial blocks? The reason is actually fascinating, and it goes right to the very heart of how we think about what a state even is. Now, seriously, let's think about that for a second. This wasn't some historical accident.
This structure was a deliberate choice, and it's based on a really old, really powerful idea about what a county actually represents.
The answer is hiding in this old Latin phrase, corpus comitatus. It means the body of the county. And that's not just some poetic expression. It's a legal concept that sees a county not as just a chunk of land, but as a fundamental organ inside the larger body of the state.
And to really get this, look at the difference between counties and, say, cities or towns, what we call municipalities. A city is more like a corporation or a utility company that the state creates to provide services. But a county is different. It's seen as a primary piece of the state's own power, in charge of core state jobs like running courts and elections.
This analogy here makes it crystal clear. If the state is the entire body, then the county is a vital organ, like a heart or a lung. A municipality, a city, is more like a vein or an artery. It's a utility, it's essential for getting things done, but it's not a core organ itself. This is why counties are the permanent infrastructure of state government.
And that's why these jurisdictional walls exist. They're there to protect the integrity of each organ. Every county is a fundamental unit of civil authority, responsible for doing the state's most important work within its own defined territory.
So that invisible fence, the one that stops the sheriff, it's about so much more than just a car chase. It's about defining the very structure of government. Which leaves us with one last huge question to think about. If a county is a vital organ of the state, what happens when that organ goes to war with the body it's a part of? Now that's a question about power that's just as real today as it was hundreds of years ago.